Have you ever felt the pressure on a construction site to just get moving because the rain is coming or the equipment rental is costing thousands every day? For many engineers, the natural instinct is to start digging and sort out the paperwork later. We call this the engineer's trap. In the world of professional project management, specifically under PMI logic, moving dirt before you have a formal document is a recipe for disaster, not just on the job, but certainly on your certification exam. Relying on these field shortcuts will almost guarantee a failing score because it ignores the fundamental rule. Zero organizational resources are committed until formal authorization exists. Think of the initiating process group as building the legal and political foundation of your project. If the physical foundation is concrete and steel, the initiating foundation is authority and alignment. This requires a massive mindset shift. You must adopt the analyze first, act second philosophy. In project management, prevention is always preferred over inspection or late-stage corrections. By formalizing the start of the project, you ensure that everyone is playing by the same rules. Now that we understand the mindset, let's look at the specific processes that make up this phase. If you were looking for a complex 50-step process, you might be surprised to learn that the initiating process group consists of exactly two processes. 4.1 Develop Project Charter and 4.2 Identify Stakeholders. That's it. However, don't let that simplicity fool you. These two pillars carry the weight of the entire project. The core purpose here is to align stakeholder expectations with the project's ultimate goal. If the stakeholders think they are getting a highway and you are building a local road, you need to find that out now, not during the ribbon cutting. This phase is where we define the initial scope and secure the why and the who before we ever worry about the how. The most critical outcome is the official appointment of the project manager and the commitment of initial financial resources. This is a common exam point. Only upon charter approval is the PM actually authorized to spend the company's money or assign staff to tasks. Without that signed document, you are just someone with a good idea, not a project manager. This leads us to look at where these projects actually come from and who holds the ultimate power to start them. Imagine a project as a sovereign nation. It has borders, and crossing those borders requires specific passports or documents. We call this the project boundary. Many of the most important documents, like the business case, actually originate outside the project. They are created before the project is even born. This is where the project sponsor comes in. The sponsor is usually a high-level executive or an external entity with the power to procure funding. A key distinction to remember is that the sponsor performs the pre-project work, the high-level justification, while the project manager is the one who executes the work once it's approved. Projects don't just appear out of thin air. They are triggered by business needs, market demands, or external legal influences. Here is a major tip for your exam. While a project manager might help write the charter because they have the technical expertise, the PM can never approve it. Only the sponsor, or a governing body, has the authority to sign off on the project's existence. Once that signature is on the page, the project is officially alive. Let's look closer at that birth certificate, the project charter. What is a project charter, really? Think of it as the project's birth certificate and the project manager's badge of authority. Process 4.1, Develop Project Charter, is the formal way we authorize a project's existence. Without it, the project doesn't officially exist in the eyes of the organization. This document serves four major functions. First, it ensures strategic alignment. It provides a direct link between the tasks you are doing and the high-level goals of the company. If the company wants to be the greenest builder in the country, the charter should reflect that. Second, it creates a formal record. It's the proof of organizational commitment. Third, it establishes an internal partnership. It bridges the gap between the people who want the work done, the requesting organization, and the people doing the work, the performing organization. Finally, and most importantly for you, it gives the PM the power to plan, execute, and control the work. Until this document is signed, you can't officially tell a lead engineer what to do or sign a purchase order for materials. But to build a charter, we need data. We need to distinguish between what the business provides and what the project creates. One of the most confusing areas for new project managers is the difference between business documents and project documents. Think of business documents as the legacy documents. They include the business case, which asks, why are we doing this? And the benefits management plan, which asks, how do we measure value? These are owned and maintained by the sponsor or a steering committee. They are inputs to your project, but you, as the PM, will never update them as a result of your daily work. On the other side of the fence, we have project documents. These are your tools. Examples include the assumption log, the issue log, and the stakeholder register. These are originated, owned, and continuously updated by you, the project manager. The rule is simple. Business documents flow into the project to help create the charter, but the project work itself never produces a business document as an output. You are the consumer of the business case, not the author of it. Now, let's look at the engine that takes these inputs and turns them into a project. To master the PMI approach, you need to understand the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs, or ITTOs. Think of this as an engine. You put raw materials in, apply a process, and get a finished product. For the charter, your inputs are the business docs we just discussed, any existing agreements, like contracts, and the environment of your company. Enterprise environmental factors, EEFs, like company culture, and organizational process assets, OPAs, like templates from past projects. You then apply tools such as expert judgment and data gathering. Think brainstorming or focus groups. You also need interpersonal skills to manage early conflicts between stakeholders. The outputs are the big ones, the project charter and the assumption log. A common exam pitfall is forgetting the assumption log. It is born right here at the very beginning. This is where we capture high-level strategic assumptions, like we assume the interest rate will stay below 5% before detailed planning ever starts. But don't mistake this internal agreement for a legal one. There's a very important distinction to make regarding contracts. There is a common wrong thinking that the project charter is a legally binding contract between the project manager and the sponsor. This is a trap. In the eyes of the law, a contract requires consideration, usually in exchange of money or something of value. Since a charter is an internal document, no money is actually changing hands between the PM and the sponsor to create it. Therefore, PMI logic dictates that a project charter is not a contract. If you are working on an external project for a client, the formal contract is what establishes the legal agreement. The charter is simply the internal tool that allows the project manager to align their team to deliver on that contract. On the exam, if you are asked about the legal status of a charter, remember, it's an authorization tool and a partnership document, but it is not something you would take to a courtroom to sue for non-payment. It secures the authority, but now we need to secure the people, the stakeholders. Now we move to the second process of initiation. 4.2, Identify stakeholders. Who is a stakeholder? Basically, anyone who can affect or be affected by your project. This includes obvious people like the sponsor and the project team, but it also includes external players like local government, environmental groups, utility providers, and even the end users who will use the final product. The process involves identifying these people regularly. It's not a one-and-done task. You must document their interests, their level of influence, and their potential impact. Why does this matter so early? Because involving them now creates a shared understanding of what success actually looks like. If you miss a critical stakeholder now, like a local water authority, you might have to tear down a half-built bridge later because it's in the wrong spot. In engineering, we know that a small error in the foundation leads to a massive lean at the top of the tower. Identifying stakeholders is how we keep the tower straight. Let's look at the engine that drives this identification. Just like the charter, identifying stakeholders has its own engine. We use the newly created project charter and those original business docs as our starting point. We also look at any agreements and company assets. The tools here are more focused on people. We use data analysis to look at documents and data representation, specifically stakeholder mapping, to visualize who has the most power. During execution of this process, you'll use questionnaires and brainstorming to map out the political landscape. You need to know who supports the project and who might try to block it. The primary output is the stakeholder register. This is a living document that classifies who cares about your project, what they want, and how much power they have to influence the outcome. This register is the project manager's secret weapon for navigating organizational politics. But be careful, there is a trap waiting for PMs who think this list is permanent. One of the biggest mistakes a project manager can make is falling into the static stakeholder trap. This is the wrong thinking that you identify your stakeholders once during initiation, lock the register, and never look at it again. PMI thinking is the opposite. This process is performed periodically throughout the project as needed, and it is mandatory at the start of every new phase. If your project moves from design to construction, you are going to have a whole new set of stakeholders, like subcontractors and local inspectors, who weren't relevant during the design phase. Here is an exam tip. If a significant change occurs in the organization, like a new CEO or a change in government regulations, you must immediately reinitiate stakeholder identification. The landscape has shifted, and your old map is now useless. This concept of restarting initiation leads us to how we manage large projects through phase gates. For large infrastructure projects, like building a dam or a power plant, we don't just initiate once and run for 5 years. We divide the project into distinct phases: feasibility, design, procurement, and construction. At the start of every single phase, we perform continuous initiation. We stop and ask, is the original business need still valid? We review the project charter, the business documents, and the current stakeholder influences. This is often called a phase gate or a kill point. The insight here is that you don't just get permission to spend $100 million once. You re-earn that authorization at the start of every new phase to verify success criteria. This ensures the company doesn't keep throwing good money after bad if the market has changed. Now, let's test your knowledge with a real-world exam scenario. Let's look at a classic exam question. You are managing a $40 million drainage upgrade. The heavy equipment is on site, the sun is shining, but the rain is coming. Your site supervisor wants to start digging right now to stay on schedule. However, the sponsor hasn't signed the project charter yet. What do? The site-focused engineer might want to start, option A, or just log the issue, option D. But the correct answer is C, delay the start of work until the project charter is approved. Why? Because according to PMI logic, the project manager has zero authority to apply organizational resources, which includes paying those equipment operators or deploying those assets until that charter is signed. Site shortcuts might save a day, but they violate the entire process of project governance. If you don't have a charter, you don't have a project. Here is another scenario focused on the second process of initiation. You are 6 months into a high-speed rail project when a local water authority suddenly halts your construction. It turns out your rail alignment goes right through a reservoir they are planning. They were never consulted. Which process was done incorrectly? The answer is B, identify stakeholders. This is a textbook case of failing to identify a critical stakeholder whose interests and influence could halt the project. In the real world, this is a multi-million-dollar mistake. On the exam, it's a reminder that identifying stakeholders isn't just a polite thing to do, it's a risk management strategy. If you don't find them in initiation, they will find you in execution, and usually they'll bring a stop work order with them. Our final scenario deals with the relationship between legal contracts and the internal charter. Your firm wins a bid for a bridge, and a formal contract is signed. While drafting the internal charter, you realize the contract budget is tighter than the business case estimated. What is the relationship here? The correct answer is B. The contract establishes the legal agreement between the two companies. The charter is the internal tool that partners the performing and requesting entities and formally empowers you, the PM, to deliver the work required by that contract. Remember, the charter does not override the contract, option A, and you can't just rewrite a signed contract, option C. They serve different purposes. The contract is the external law, and the charter is the internal commission. Now let's wrap everything up with a final checklist for your exam prep. As you prepare for the exam, keep this initiation checklist in your mind. First, remember strategic alignment. Projects must be justified by business documents that exist outside the project boundary. Second, focus on formal authority. The project charter is your only source of power. If it isn't approved, you aren't spending a dime. Third, never forget the legal status. The charter is an internal agreement, never a legally binding contract. Fourth, think about high-level framing. The assumption log is born here to capture strategic risks before you get into the weeds of planning. Finally, remember network mapping. Identifying stakeholders is a continuous, repetitive process. In the exam room, when you are faced with a choice between taking immediate physical action on a site or establishing formal alignment and documented authority, always choose authority. That is the PMI way. Good luck with your studies, and remember, build your foundation in initiation before you try to reach the sky in execution.